Mr. Chairman, honorable members of the committee, I appreciate being here today. My name is Mark Meckler. I am the president of the Convention of States Action. We're a national 501c4 organization which is pursuing the calling of a convention in 34 states across the country. We're pursuing it in all 50. It takes 34 states to call a convention according to the Constitution, 2/3 of states being required. This is very similar, by the way, to the requirement in Congress. If Congress wishes to propose an amendment, it takes 2/3 of each house to propose an amendment. I'd like to start by refuting some of the things that have been said here today and presented as factual that simply aren't factual. I'd like to start with what I think is the most simple thing to refute is, Senator Lawyers, you are wearing a red mask and there's nothing that anybody could do to convince me that you're wearing a blue mask. So I just want to clarify that as a matter of perception. Look, we've been told that your constituents don't support this. And that's a general thing I heard it said in every legislature I've ever testified in. We're very transparent as an organization. We're very clear with you who supports in your district. We provide you with the petitions from the people who do support. I can tell you in your own districts, Senator Lawyers has 2,241 people who signed petitions in support. Senator Shirkey, 1,959. Senator Chang, 682. Senator Ananich, 1,212. And it's very important to us. We provide you with the information from all these constituents because we like you to be able to contact them if you want to and discuss that with them. What you'll find from our opponents, and this is true universally, nationally, as well as here in Michigan, they will have people who are not from your districts contact you. We do everything in our power to prevent that. Our system is designed to prevent people from out of district contacting you. We value your time very much. We don't do statewide or national calls to ask people to call you guys. We know you're busy and you have other things to do. So I just wanted to give you the facts about the numbers of people. Here in Michigan, we polled the Michigan electorate. Roughly 2/3 of Michiganders across party lines support calling a convention according to these terms. So this is not a partisan issue. It's not a contentious or divisive issue as presented by the Michigan Conservative Union. And so sometimes it frustrates me when I hear this described as divisive or contentious. We do live in very divisive and contentious times, and I am very concerned about that. And one of the causes of this division and this contention in the United States of America is the concentration of power in Washington, D.C. Your constituents here in Michigan, though it might feel divided right now, your favorability ratings as a legislature are much higher than Congress, much higher than the president's, because your people in your state trust you as they should. The popularity of state legislatures and local governance much higher than that of Washington, D.C., consistently over the decades and rising now as compared to Washington, D.C. And so I could tell you 2/3 of your constituents has polled, and this, again, consistent across the nation. I think this is really important in this time of division, because when we decide major issues that face the citizens of our states in Washington, D.C., and we are in a divided country, we can be pretty sure we're going to make 50% of the country angry, roughly, 48, 49, 49.5%. We're going to be divided on the major issues that face us. And that's why the founders designed a system where the majority of these issues were to be decided by you in state legislatures, because they understood that states vary in culture, in demeanor, in temperament, in population, state by state, and they designed this incredible republic where you had the power to make the majority of the decisions. Under our original Constitution, the majority of powers, or all the powers granted to the federal government, were narrow, and they were defined. They were enumerated, as the saying goes, as the language says. State powers were broad and undefined and unlimited, powers reserved to the states and the people. Today, we flip that power paradigm on its head, and the majority of the power is wielded in Washington, D.C. Can't speak exactly to your budget here in Michigan, but I can tell you on average, 60% of state budgets now controlled in one way or another by the federal government. I've been in 48 states over the last couple of years. The most common complaint that I hear from state legislatures in addressing the problems of their own state, very local or state-based problems, is we would, but we can't because Washington prevents us. We have an opportunity, and this is the entire point of the Convention of States resolution, to rebalance the power between the federal government and the states. And it is not a partisan issue. You will note in the resolution, there are no policy prescriptions in the resolution. We say that the federal government should be fiscally responsible. Is that a Democratic talking point? Is that a Republican talking point? No, that's what the American people believe. The American people, by 85%, have said over the last 30 years, in some way or another, the federal government should live within its means. Over 80% of Americans consistently, for 30 years, have said that Congress should be limited in its terms. It has been suggested that we should allow Congress to decide these things because our previous 27 amendments have indeed been proposed by Congress and ratified by the states. And I would ask this question because I think we have to deal in reality. Is there anybody in this room that expects Congress to pass a balanced budget amendment? Is there anybody in this room that expects Congress to impose limitations on their own spending? These are not things that are within human nature. I'm not being critical of Congress when I say this. People do not voluntarily limit their own power. And the very reason that Article 5, this provision of Article 5 was put in the United States Constitution is because it was recognized by the founders that we existed within our own human nature. September 15th, 1787, Colonel George Mason stood and he addressed the assembly 2 days before the end of convention. And he said, we have a fundamental problem with the document that we've drafted. We've given the power to Congress to propose amendments should they deem them necessary, but we've not given the equivalent power to the people acting through the states. And then he asked a question which I think resonates across the centuries. Are we so naive that we believe that a federal government that oversteps its bounds will propose amendments to restrain itself? And we know what the founders answered. Madison's notes are exceptionally clear in this regard. There was no debate. Madison's notes say nin com, two Latin words mean no comment, no debate. They debated everything. They debated the rules of debate, but they did not debate this. It was so obvious to the founders that eventually the federal government would exceed its bounds and become tyrannical, and the states would have to act, that they didn't debate it. It was proposed by Eldridge Gerry to give the power to the states to propose amendments, and it was unanimously adopted into the Constitution to give us that power. Specifically and importantly, to give you that power. Why you? Why state legislators? Why were you given this power? That's an enormous power. I would argue you're the most powerful members of the federal government. And I realize generally you don't consider yourselves part of the federal government. I'm sure as part of your orientation, they don't tell you about your role in the federal government, but you and only you were given the power by the framers of the Constitution to call a convention, to send people to propose amendments, and then to ratify those amendments or to reject them. Why were you given that power? And the answer is very simple if you look at the history. The answer is because they were you. They served in the colonial legislatures. They served on town councils and local government, and they trusted local government far more than they trusted a distant government. They had a lot of experience with that. And so they imbued you with a power that is extraordinary and the responsibility that comes with that power. I'd like to briefly address some of the comments about a runaway convention. I'm sure there will be those questions, so I'll address them in advance, and then I can fill in as people feel like I might have missed something. One of the things that's most important to remember is that no matter what comes out of convention, a convention has precisely no power, zero power. The convention has no legal authority to do anything other than make suggestions. And I can tell you, having been around 48 legislatures, I've never met a legislature that was afraid to go into a committee hearing and discuss something. You know, when you go into a committee hearing, nothing comes out of it that's more than a suggestion to your legislature. It has to get voted on in committee, it has to come out of committee, it has to go to the floor, it has to be voted on. This is a very similar process for proposing amendments to the United States Constitution. It's just a suggestion. And in the end, it takes 38 states to ratify something that becomes part of the United States Constitution. As a person who's been in 48 states over the last couple of years, I would put this challenge out to anybody. Send me an amendment that you would not like, that you believe you can name the 38 states that would ratify it. I've made that request to millions of people on the air and off the air over the last 6 years. I've never received a single email. And I would challenge anybody to do that. You can't ratify something that's not in the mainstream of American politics today. We've heard a lot of talk today about fear. People are afraid. Campaign for Liberty is afraid. I heard those words, Michigan Conservative Union, concerned and afraid. She said the founders would be fearful. The founders were not fearful people. These were incredibly brave people who stood in the face of much greater threats than we face today and took much greater risk than we take today. And so I ask you to stand and to fulfill your role as given to you by the framers of the United States Constitution and pass out of committee SJRL, helping your legislature join the fight to call a convention of states and restrain federal tyranny and return the power to Michigan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Go to conventionofstates.com, press the button, sign the petition. More importantly, get 10 of your friends to do the same. When you sign the petition, then that sends a letter to your state legislator. You go on the list in their district as a supporter. We deliver those lists to the state legislators. It means something to them.